So, my name is Jake Graham, and this is a presentation of chapters 1 through 6 of everything I've learned in ComSci 345 so far. Chapter 1 focused on introduction to networking, which consisted of network models, which consisted of topologies like physical, which was like hardware layout, and logical, which was software access, peer-to-peer models, which were simple, cost-effective for small networks, but not scalable or secure. And then we had client-server models, which centralized management via NOS, which was Active Directory, and it allows for better scalability and security. Next, we learned about were protocols and services, which were essential for communication, and key protocols include TCP/IP, HTTP/HTTPS, SMTP, POP3, and DNS. Security protocols like SSL/TLS ensure safe data transmission. We also learned about network hardware and key devices such as switches, routers, and NICs. We also learned about LANs connecting devices directly, often using star topology, while wide area networks, which is WANs, connect multiple local area networks over larger distances. We have OSI models, which are the 7 layers that define network communication from application interfaces to physical data transmission. And then finally, we learned about safety and troubleshooting. That's going to come up a lot in this presentation because there's always safety and troubleshooting. For this chapter specifically, it was fire safety systems and emergency protocols, fail open versus fail close, and them being crucial. Troubleshooting involves identifying problems, testing theories, and documenting resolutions. Chapter 2, infrastructure and documentation. We learned about the standards, which was following ANSI/TIA-568 for structured cabling, and the latest version being all that -D. Cabling types, which include patch cables, which for short connections, horizontal cabling, which had a max of 100 meters, and backbone cabling, which interconnected facilities. We had focusing on cable management, which was proper termination, bend radius, and continuity testing. Monitoring and security, which was essentially just utilizing temperature sensors and HVAC systems. And then securing data rooms with access controls. Documentation, which is basically just essential for troubleshooting, and it includes network diagrams and inventory management. And then we also had change management, which was plan and document changes, consider software and hardware updates carefully. Next was Chapter 3, addressing, which include the data link layer, which was made up of MAC addresses, which are unique 48-bit identifiers for NICs. And there's a little example there. We had the network layer, which was made up of IP addresses, which there are multiple forms of IP addresses, like the IP version 4 and then the IP version 6. And then we also had to deal with public versus private IPs, where public are internet routable and private are for local networks. We had the transport layer, which mainly dealt with ports, and ports identify application/services. We then also had to deal with the application layer, which dealt with domain names, which are human readable addresses translated by the DNS. Then we had the IANA and the ICANN, and both the IANA manages the IP addresses and domain names, while the ICANN oversees global internet policy. Next was Chapter 4 with protocols. The protocols were TCP, IP, which include IP version 4 and IP version 6, UDP, and ARP. We had the layer structure, which 7 through 5 generated the payload. Layer 4 transports, which adds headers, which is the TCP, and it's reliable, versus the UDP, which is unreliable. Layer 3 is networking, which routes packets using IP addresses. Layer 2 is data link, which we covered before, encapsulates data into frames. And the first layer is physical, and it transmits frames over the network. We dealt with connectivity devices like switches in layer 2, routers in layer 3, firewalls in layers 4 and 7. Security, we covered IPsec for encryption, SSL/TLS for secure web connections. We dealt with remote access like VPNs and terminal emulation like SSH and RDP. And then we dealt with more troubleshooting tools like netstat for connections and tracert/traceroute for path tracing. Next was on to Chapter 5, which is cabling, and we dealt with transmission basics, basically networks utilizing complex techniques and optimization being ongoing. We dealt with the frequency, bandwidth, and throughput, where frequency indicates signal change, bandwidth is theoretical capacity, and throughput is the actual data received. We then dealt with transmission flaws like noise and crosstalk affecting signal integrity, and then we also dealt with attenuation and latency impacting performance. We also dealt with cable types, a lot of cable types, which were coaxial, twisted pair, and fiber optic, to name a few. And then we also dealt with troubleshooting tools like the toner kits, the multimeter, the continuity tester to help diagnose issues. Finally, we dealt with Chapter 6, which was wireless networking, and in there we dealt with wide local area networks and how they use RF waves for communication, which is essential for modern networks and Internet of Things. We dealt with the wireless spectrum, which is defined by the FCC being between 9 kilohertz and 300 gigahertz using electromagnetic waves. We dealt with key technologies, which consisted of RFID for inventory management, the NFC for short-range communication, Wi-Fi for various standards operating at multiple gigahertz, and Bluetooth, which was for short-range device connectivity. We dealt with channel management, which was FHSS and DSSS technologies to minimize interference. We covered signal propagation, which was affected by obstacles. Then we dealt with the 802.11 standards, which support TCP/IP protocols with varying throughput and range. We dealt with the security, which involves authentication for data protection. And finally, we dealt with troubleshooting tools like spectrum analyzers for signal quality and Wi-Fi analyzers for optimization. And that is everything. Thank you for listening.